So, as Andrew said, today I will be giving the talk. But before I give the talk, I want to kind of like start again with our community theme that we said that we would have over the next 3 years. And the theme is trusting in the Father, rooted in Christ, bearing fruit in the Spirit. So over the next 3 years, as we have activities, the talks, a lot of them are focused on the theme. Our key focus for 2019, the area is generosity, and we look at it as generosity with time, talent, and treasure. This is the list of talks that we have for the first half of the year. Last week, Tao Kok gave a talk on the grace of God, and this week I will give a talk on, last week, 2 weeks ago, the last gathering, on the mercy of God. And I'll also touch a little bit on what's the difference between the grace of God and the mercy of God. Okay? So let me start with a story. Can you see the picture? The picture, what does the picture look like? The picture is, there's a king, and then there's the jester, court jester. What's the court jester? What's the role of the court jester? Make the king laugh, right? So, typically to entertain the king. So I have a short story on this one about the king and the court jester. It is related a bit to mercy, so it's not unrelated. Anyway, the story really goes like this. Obviously, right, the court jester, their job is to entertain the king. One day, one night, the court jester went too far. So, in his entertainment, and he went too far, by accident he insulted the king. Obviously, the king got angry, right? So the king got terribly upset by being insulted. Not on purpose, but got insulted anyway. And so, in his rage, the king said, "I sentence you to execution," so to die. Right? So because he was insulted, he told the court jester, "You're gonna die by execution." So everybody was shocked, right? Most especially the court jester. But the court jester was well loved by the court of the king, and so the court of the king, basically they asked the king many times. He said, "King, can you please have mercy on the court jester? King, can you please have mercy on the court jester?" And after many times, right, eventually the king, after some time, said, "Okay, I will have some mercy on the court jester. I will reduce the sentence." He said, "You can still die. You will still die, actually," he said. "But you have a choice on how you will die." Right? So I leave it up to you on what the choice. I give it up to you, to the court jester on the choice of how you will die. And the court jester basically said, keeping up with his kind of like, he's being a joker, right? He said, the court jester said, "If it's all the same to you, my lord, I'd like to die of old age." So, that's the way he escaped his execution. So, anyway, what's the point? The point is on mercy, right? So, in this aspect of mercy, right, one aspect of mercy is really about kind of like a reduction in a penalty or a pardon that is given, right, by someone of authority. And I just told it in a joke way. Anyway, I would like first to start also by first defining mercy. What is mercy and how it is defined? And there are a couple of, I would probably say, definitions. So I have some pictures here. Right? There's one here which says, "We prefer a beheading, but we've decided to slew you instead." So this is to the king, right? So, and then here's another picture of someone kneeling in front of the king and asking for forgiveness. So, one definition of mercy, or how you would describe mercy, is all about clemency. And clemency is reducing a penalty, let's say you were sentenced to die, it's possible that your sentence could be commuted to maybe life imprisonment, right? So one definition of mercy is about giving clemency when somebody deserves a particular punishment. You would see also it's about leniency, right? Sometimes maybe somebody deserves the belt, right? Maybe kids might deserve the belt, but maybe you become a little bit lenient and maybe just give them a slap on the hand. That's another definition also of mercy. Still another one, there's debt, right? So somebody who's in debt, and then perhaps someone who's burdened with debt needs some help or kind of like by reduction of the debt or deferment of the debt, give them time to pay. That's forbearance, right? So forbearance of debt is another definition or characteristic of mercy. But it's not just about a reduction of a penalty, right? It's not just about, mercy is not just about someone in power or someone who has a hold on you giving kind of like a gift, or in one sense, or reducing a penalty. When you look at Christian definitions, and some of them, right, there are others, right? Mercy is also about compassion. So here, this is a picture of soldiers, right, in the battlefield, in the trenches, and obviously with war, right? With all the emotions that come with war, there's compassion that sometimes is needed. So mercy is also about compassion. It's care, right? So mercy is also about giving care to those who are in need, to those who are sick. Maybe someone met an accident on the side of the road, or you have a brother or sister or neighbor who needs help, right? So mercy is also about giving care. A higher order of mercy is also about forgiveness, right? So many times somebody, even a close friend or even your children, right, may wrong you, and they may hurt you. Right? Mercy is also about forgiving them when they say sorry and acknowledging their repentance. Right? So mercy comes in many aspects. It's about leniency, it's about commutation of a penalty, but it's also about reaching out and then giving forgiveness to people who ask for it. Now, oftentimes also, we distinguish, or sometimes we interchange between mercy and grace, right? And Taukok talked about the grace of the Lord last time. In fact, I would also sometimes mix up the two. What's the difference between mercy and grace? But to help distinguish the two, I found, right, and this is a bit more about, I would probably say, sometimes the Christian definition. There's another word that really comes into play, and that is the word justice, right? Justice is all about getting what you deserve, right? So you commit a crime, you commit sin, you do something wrong. Justice is like a consequence or a punishment, right? So for us Christians, right, so we commit sin, right? We do something wrong. What would have been the penalty for sin? Death, right? So that is justice, right? You do something wrong, you get what you deserve, and typically that's death. But in God's world, right, He also introduces the word of mercy and grace, right? So mercy is not getting what you deserve. So we deserve justice, right? We deserve the penalty of death, but we got mercy, right? So it's not getting what you deserve. And grace, which Taukok talked about, is getting something you don't deserve. So grace is something like a blessing, an extra blessing. You may not deserve that blessing, but you got the blessing in return. I have another analogy with the story with the prodigal son. Who knows about the prodigal son? I think a lot of us know. It's a very popular Bible story. And this is another analogy about how do you differentiate between grace and mercy. In the prodigal son, as you know, right? So the younger son squandered the wealth that he was given, came back. Right? Mercy is his dad coming back and giving him a second chance. Right? So he comes back, asks for forgiveness. He gets mercy from his father, and the father receives him. That's about mercy. Right? Even though he had insulted his father, squandered the wealth, father gives him mercy, accepts him back. Grace is the feast that the father gives afterwards. Right? He gives him a ring, gives him clothes, kills the fattened calf, the young calf, and gives a feast. Right? So I would probably say that's how you distinguish between mercy and grace. I won't talk about too much more about the grace part, but suffice to say, they really come interchangeably. God is merciful, as you all know. And you can see this a lot in the stories in the Bible, and you experience it a lot also yourself. I'll give you two stories in the Bible. Who's this? This is Adam and Eve, right? So in Genesis, right? So at the very beginning, as you know, Adam and Eve sinned, right? They ate from the tree of life, and they got banished from Eden, right? And so you would look at that as there's justice there because they were already told not to eat, they still ate, they were tricked by the serpent, but they got banished, right? From Eden. So they were to die because they were out from the tree of life. What is the fulfillment of that mercy? So God did not just banish them, He gave them hope, right? So the fulfillment of that mercy was, yes, they deserved to die, but eventually because Jesus came on the cross and resurrected, God's mercy was fulfilled. And so now all of us, as long as we ask for forgiveness, can live. And so what do we learn from that? We learn from that is that God gives us hope of redemption when we fall. So every time we fall, as long as we return to God, there is redemption. So God's mercy means redemption for us. There's another story which shows really about how God has been merciful to us. Right? And it's in the Bible, it's in the New Testament. This is Peter. Right? So you all know about Peter's denial 3 times, right? So in this time when Jesus was taken to the house of the high priest, Peter followed. He was outside, as you know, and he got asked several times. He said, "Don't you know Jesus?" Right? So he denied Jesus 3 times. Jesus predicted it, right? So Jesus said, "You will deny me before the cock crows." And so in this situation, you can imagine, right? This came in after Peter said, Jesus had called him the rock, right? And he then denied Jesus afterwards. And so you can imagine the guilt that Peter must have felt, especially after the cock crowed. He said he denied Jesus 3 times. So how did Jesus redeem him? So after Jesus was resurrected, he came back, right? And he asked the 3 questions, right? Basically 1 question, but asked it 3 times. He told Peter, he asked Peter, "Do you love me?" Right? And then he said, "Feed my sheep, tend to my sheep." And Peter each time said, "You know, Lord, I love you." So after he said that, what did the Lord say to him? What did Jesus say to Peter? He said, Jesus eventually said, "Follow me." But Jesus also gave him a picture of what he would do to glorify him. So with those questions, what did the Lord was able to show in His mercy, right? He was able to redeem Peter. after his fall, after his denial. What does that also show? That God pursues us in spite of our shortcomings. So Peter had many shortcomings, but the Lord continued to pursue him nonetheless. Even after he denied the Lord continued to pursue him. Until he restored Peter, and you know what Peter eventually did, started the church of the Lord. So from all these stories and from the definition that I gave, there are, I would probably say, what characteristics of how God's mercy is shown and how you should be able to see. So this picture is like the ocean. Right? So the mercy of God is just like that. It's very vast, like the ocean. And you could see God's mercy in different forms, right? The first is, typically what would you see? A marvelous transformation in the people, right? In the person with whom God has shown mercy. So in the case of Peter, you saw it after denial. Peter's restored and Peter gives his life to the Lord. Right? So you see a marvelous transformation. You also see encouragement, or it's very encouraging. So even if you fall, or even if you have a shortcoming, God's mercy encourages you to go on and to come back. It redeems. You feel a lot of guilt, but with the Lord's mercy, you feel it really redeems you, right? So in the eyes of the Lord, you are redeemed. There's definitely a lot of care and compassion. You see that in a lot of the stories, where in the miracles that Jesus has also performed. It's immeasurable. Like I said, it's vast, like the ocean. Right? So God's mercy is very wide. So you can continue to sin, and then ask for forgiveness, He will continue to give mercy for you. There's obviously forgiveness when it comes. So the Lord forgets, right? He remembers, but he more or less, He would probably say He will forgive you for any sin that you commit, as long as you ask sorry, ask for forgiveness. It's unmerited. With everything we do, with everything sometimes our shortcomings, God's mercy is really, really unmerited. And it's rooted in love. Right? So if you look at it, God's mercy is defined for me, my acronym is merciful. Right? So the ultimate is God's mercy is rooted in love. We are also called to imitate God's mercy. Because we have been given mercy, we have been called to imitate God's mercy, each one of us. How do we answer the call? One is patience, right? Patience to our brothers and sisters. We are not perfect. We all have our own shortcomings, we all have our own, how do we call it? Imperfections, right? And sometimes those imperfections can rub on the next person, not even intentionally. So to imitate God's mercy is, let's be patient. Right? When somebody might unintentionally rub you the wrong way, it's good to be patient. Right? That's also showing God's mercy. Empathy. You have a brother, you have a sister, sick, right? Maybe there's a death in the family, or the loss of a job. Empathy, try to feel how that person may be feeling, try to understand and provide them comfort. Actively share one's resources, not enough to just sometimes sympathize or empathize, right? But share your resources. Spend time with a brother or sister who is in need. Maybe sometimes give some of your financial resources if they need. So actively share your resources. Care for others, right? So this is one of the things that we typically overtly do, right? Which is the works of mercy. So that's another way, right? So care for our less fortunate brothers and sisters. And the last I would probably say also how we answer is to always try to be encouraging. So encourage one another. Right? Somebody does something, the music, right? Say the music's good. Maybe it's not really up there, but then encourage the brother and sister. And so that's also important. This is how we can also repay the Lord for the mercy that He continues to show us every day. This is only possible with love and generosity of heart. If we only look at it from our eyes and we don't look at it with love and generosity, it will be almost close to impossible for us to imitate God's mercy. So much the same way that God's mercy to us is rooted in love, we also need to be rooted in love and be generous. If you look at our community, right, mercy is a critical ingredient for us to build a strong community. Our community is built on relationships, right? Relationships of different people who have all their shortcomings and imperfections. We cannot, if we are not merciful with one another, we cannot have a strong community. If we are not forgiving with one another for the faults of one another, there's no community to begin with. The relationships would not be strong, right? So mercy, the mercy that we show to the other helps build a strong relationship. And I would say in SOL, that's what has enabled us to last for a very long time as well. It's because of the mercy that we show one another. Before I end and conclude, and I'm in my last slide, right, I'd also like to share, right, just kidding. About God's mercy for me in my life and how it triggered also my conversion, I would say. I came to know community when I was back in the Philippines. I came to know community through my wife, Michelle. She was not my wife then at the time. Before I came to know community, I would probably say, I would say just a Christian who would be going to church every Sunday. But that's probably the extent of my Christian duties. I would pray. Sometimes I don't pray every day. That was how I was. And I did not really want to join a charismatic community because I kind of like got, I would probably say, I don't know, I'm a bit scared when I see people raise the hands and do the praise and worship. Because I didn't have a very good experience initially. So when I came to meet Michelle again after a couple of years, I found that she was joining a community for single professionals called Lingkod in the Philippines, in Makati. And she was going there every Friday evening. I think every Friday, right? Every Friday evening. And then I wouldn't want to join, so I would just bring her to the place, to the building, drop her off, and I'd say, okay, how long is your prayer meeting? She'd say about 2 hours. I'd say, I'll come back and fetch you.
Mr. Graham.
And then, yeah, so I was her Uber driver at the time. So I really, really tried to avoid. And then after about a couple of months, her action group, so they also had small groups in Lingkod at the time, needed a place to meet. And so I worked in PNG. We had lots of office space in the evening. So I'd let their action group into our floor. Obviously, we had some room and so they would use the room. So I think they would have action group once a week also, right? So I'd let them in. This happened for 2 years, right? So same routine, I'm not joining. This happened for 2 years. And then I think after 2 years, Michelle just came to me and said, one Friday, he said, you might want to just park the car, and then join the prayer meeting. And that was it, right? After that, I was hooked, right? I saw how the worship was. I saw brothers and sisters who were working just like me, right? But also worshiping the Lord. Right? After, I would probably say just before I made the commitment, Michelle then told me that this, all that time, apparently the sisters were always praying for me while they were in 2 years, they prayed. And so I would say because of their prayers and because of God's mercy, right, because they pursued me silently and quietly, I'm here today giving the talk. So that's how I would also see God's mercy work in my life, right? So the reason why I'm in community today is because of God's mercy. And I continue to experience His grace. So in conclusion, I'd want to say each one of us is a beneficiary of God's mercy. Each one of us receive God's mercy every day. As we have received mercy, so we must give mercy to others. God gives it to us freely. We should also give freely to others. With mercy, we can build strong relationships with others as well as strong Christian communities. We can build strong relationships even with the family with mercy. So I encourage each one of you to show God's mercy to others and love and be generous. Thank you.
Amen.